I missed the bus by seconds. I got mad. I blamed the whole day. Then a stranger spoke to me. One sentence, one small choice. And my life quietly changed direction. If you've ever had a morning that felt ruined, stay with me. Because this is the moment I didn't know I needed. Evan Parker had one simple plan that morning: catch the 7:40 bus, get to the office, survive Monday, go home, forget the whole thing. It sounded easy. It was not. The alarm rang. I shut it off. I told myself I had time. I did not. I moved too slow. I looked for my keys. I checked my bag twice. I spilled coffee on my shirt. I changed it. I rushed out. The hallway felt longer than usual. The stairs felt like a bad joke. Outside the air was cold and sharp. The sky was gray. The street was loud. I ran anyway. I saw the bus at the corner. I waved. I pushed my legs harder. I felt my lungs complain. The driver did not look back. The doors closed. The bus pulled away like it had a grudge, and I stopped, right there on the sidewalk, with my hand still raised, like a person asking for help too late. I stared at the bus lights shrinking, and my face got hot, my jaw tightened, my thoughts turned mean, not about anyone in particular. Just mean in general. I muttered things I should not have muttered. I kicked a small pebble. It bounced and rolled and did not fix anything. People passed me. They had their own lives. They did not care about my missed bus. And somehow that made it worse. I felt like the whole city had decided to test me. I checked my phone. The next bus was in 20 minutes. 20 minutes sounded like an hour. I walked to the stop. I paced. I looked up and down the street. I complained in my head. I argued with the universe. I imagined explaining it to my manager. I imagined the sigh. I imagined the look, and I got even more annoyed. Then a voice near me said, "Rough morning, huh?" I did not answer at first, because I did not want company. I wanted a time machine. I glanced sideways. A guy stood there with a worn backpack, a dark beanie, and calm eyes. He was about my age, maybe a little older. He held a paper cup like it was warm comfort. He did not look rushed. He looked steady, like he had learned something I had not. I gave a short shrug. He nodded. Like he understood, he said, "The bus has perfect timing. It always leaves exactly when you are almost there." I let out a small laugh, against my will, because it was true, and he smiled, not big, just enough. He looked up the street, then back at me. He said, "I'm Miles Carter, by the way." I should have just said hi and looked away. I should have stayed in my mood, but I didn't. I said, Evan Parker." And the moment I said it, something shifted, not like a miracle, more like a door opening. Little, Miles pointed across the street. He said, "There's a cafe with decent coffee. Want to wait there instead of freezing?" I hesitated, because I was annoyed, and annoyed people make stubborn choices. But the wind pushed at my jacket, and the thought of standing still for 20 minutes felt silly, so I nodded once. We crossed together. Cars hissed over wet asphalt. The cafe bell rang as we entered. Warm air wrapped around my face. And my anger, for the first time that morning, started to loosen its grip. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and toasted bread. It was not fancy. It was honest. Miles ordered like he had been there 100 times. He asked for a plain latte and a blueberry muffin. Then he looked at me and waited. I ordered something similar, because my brain was still catching up. We sat near the window. The glass was fogged at the edges. People walked by outside like moving shadows. I stared at my hands for a second, because I did not know what to do with this random moment. Miles took a slow sip. He did not rush the silence. That was the first thing I noticed. He could sit in quiet without making it awkward. After a bit he said, "You look like you wanted to argue with the street back there." I exhaled. I said, "I hate being late. I hate feeling like I'm already behind." Miles nodded. He said, "Yeah, that feeling is heavy. Like you're carrying a bag of rocks you never agreed to pick up." I blinked, because it was too accurate. I asked him, "Do you take this bus often?" He said, "Used to, not as much now." I asked, "What changed?" He smiled again. That small calm smile. He said, "I changed." Then he tapped the table lightly, like keeping a quiet rhythm. He said, "Tell me something, Evan. When you miss something, like a bus, what do you do next?" I frowned. I said, "I get mad, obviously." He nodded. He said, "And after the mad part, what's the next step?" I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I realized I had no planned next step. I just spun in frustration. Miles leaned back. He said, "I'm not judging. I did the same for years." He looked out the window. His eyes followed a passing bike, then he looked back. He said, I had a mentor once. He taught me a tiny habit. He called it the pivot. When something goes wrong, you pause, you name it, you pivot to the next best move. He held up a finger. He said, not the perfect move, just the next best move. I felt defensive for a second, then curious. I asked, what's the point? Miles said, the point is you get your time back. You stop paying interest on a mistake. That line hit me harder than I expected, because it made my anger feel expensive. I stared at my coffee. The surface shook slightly as my hand moved. I said, easy for you to say. You seem relaxed. Miles chuckled softly. He said, I wasn't always. Then he looked at my bag, the cheap strap, the frayed edge. He said, you work downtown, right? I nodded. I told him the building. He nodded like he knew it. He said, marketing or tech? I said, tech support, mostly. Tickets, mostly fixing the same problems. I said it with that tired tone people use when they've stopped expecting a change. Miles listened. He did not give me empty pep talk. He said, that kind of work can teach you patterns, if you pay attention. I raised an eyebrow. He said, a system is just repeating behavior. People are systems too. Offices are systems. Bus schedules are systems. Once you see systems, you can redesign them. I laughed. I said, I can't redesign my manager. Miles grinned. He said, no, but you can redesign your route, your habits, your options. I felt my phone buzz. I checked the bus time. It was getting close. I should have left, but I didn't move yet, because the conversation felt strangely useful, like warm light on cold hands. I asked Miles, what do you do? He paused, like choosing the simplest answer. He said, I help people learn. Learn what? I asked. He said, mostly how to build things that make life smoother. I leaned forward. He had my attention now. He added, sometimes it's software, sometimes it's a plan, sometimes it's just a different way to think. I wanted to ask more, but the bus app updated. It said arriving. Miles stood up. He said, we can finish this later, if you want. I surprised myself by saying, yeah, I want. He pulled out a small card, plain, with his name, Miles Carter, and a number. He slid it across the table. He said, text me when you get a minute. And Evan, try the pivot today, just once. I took the card. My fingers held it like it was fragile. We walked out together. The wind hit again, but it felt less personal now. The bus arrived, doors opened, and I stepped on, still late, still Monday, but no longer alone in my own head. On the bus I kept looking at the card, like it might change if I stared long enough. Miles Carter, simple font, no fancy title, no big promise, just a number. I put it in my wallet, then took it out again, because my mind was restless. I finally looked out the window and tried his habit. I named the problem. I missed the earlier bus. I was late. Then I asked, what is the next best move? Not perfect, just next. The answer was simple. Breathe, walk in calmly, tell the truth, do the first ticket. I hated how reasonable it sounded, but it helped. I got off downtown. I walked fast but not panicked. I entered the building. I nodded at the security desk. I rode the elevator with people who smelled like perfume and urgency. At my floor I stepped out. My manager, Dana Reed, spotted me. She raised one eyebrow. I felt the usual heat rise, but I tried the pivot again. I said, bus delay, I'm here now. I'm starting on the queue. Dana sighed, then waved her hand, like she had already moved on. And that was it. No dramatic lecture, no disaster, just work. The day went on, the same questions, the same resets, the same passwords. But my head kept replaying Miles's words, you stop paying interest on a mistake. It made me realize how many small mistakes I carried around like trophies. I held them. I polished them. I complained about them. Then I wondered why I was tired. At lunch I sat outside with my sandwich. I looked at the sky, still gray. I pulled out my phone. I hesitated, then I typed. Hey Miles, this is Evan from the bus stop. I almost deleted it, because texting strangers feels weird, but I sent it. The reply came fast. Hey Evan, good to hear from you. How did the morning end? I stared at the message. I wrote, I tried the pivot, it helped, still not a great day, but less awful. Miles replied, that counts. Want to grab coffee after work? I checked my schedule. I thought about how I usually went home and scrolled until sleep. I thought about how my life felt like a loop. I typed, sure, 6 p.m., same cafe. Miles replied, perfect, see you then. The rest of the day felt lighter, not because the work changed, but because I had a point on the calendar that wasn't just survival. At 5:45 I left. I walked fast, the sidewalks were busy, the city lights flickered on, the cafe was warm again, Miles was already there. In the same calm way, he stood and shook my hand, like we were old friends. We sat, he asked about my work, I told him the boring parts, and he didn't act bored. He asked different questions no one at the office asked, he said, when a ticket repeats, what's the real cause, not the surface cause, the pattern behind it? I shrugged, I said users forget steps, systems have glitches, training is bad. Miles nodded, he said, and if you could fix only one thing, what would you fix? I stared at him, because it sounded like a trap, but it wasn't, it was an invitation, I said. I'd fix the training. People don't understand the tools, they guess then. They panic. Miles pointed at me, like I'd said something important. He said, that's a designer's eye, you see confusion and you want clarity. I laughed. I said, I'm not a designer, I'm a support guy. Miles said, labels are sticky, but they aren't law. Then he pulled out his laptop, he opened a simple document, he said, show me one common issue, write the steps you wish people had. I blinked. Because no one had ever asked me to write what I wished, I started listing steps, short, clear, like I was talking to a friend. Miles watched, he nodded, he said, good, now make it even simpler, remove any word you don't need. I edited, he smiled, he said, you just made a guide, Evan, a real one. I felt a strange spark, small but real. Miles leaned in, he said, I have a friend who runs onboarding at a mid-sized company, they pay for clean internal guides, it's not glamorous, but it's honest money, and it builds a portfolio. I heard the word portfolio, and my stomach flipped, like a door opening. Again, Miles said, if you want, we can build 3 guides, then I introduce you, no promises, just a chance, and I realized, right there, that missing the bus was turning into a different route entirely. We met twice that week, then again on Saturday. Miles was consistent, not pushy, not flaky, consistent, and it made me trust him faster than I expected. We worked in the cafe, we worked in a quiet library, once we worked in a park with gloves on. He taught me how to break a messy process into clean steps, he taught me to watch where a person hesitates, because hesitation is where confusion lives, he said. Clarity is kindness. He made me read my own sentences out loud. If I stumbled, the user would stumble too. We built 3 guides, one for password resets, one for setting up a new laptop, one for access requests. They were simple, they were friendly, they had screenshots, they had short titles. Miles showed me a free tool for clean layouts. He showed me how to name files so teams could find them. He showed me how to write like a human, not like a robot. The funny thing was, I started enjoying it. I would finish a guide and feel a quiet pride, like my brain had finally found a shape it liked. One evening I asked Miles, why are you helping me? He did not dodge the question, he said, because someone helped me, and because you were angry at a bus, and that's a familiar kind of angry. I laughed, but my throat tightened a bit, because it was true, I had been living in that kind of angry, the kind that doesn't explode, it just simmers, and it makes everything taste dull. Miles said also, I like seeing people surprise themselves. I asked him again, what do you do for work? He gave me more detail this time. He said he consulted for small companies, he helped them improve training, improve internal tools, improve how teams communicated. He said he wasn't a genius, he was just patient. He said patience is a skill you can train. I wanted to believe that, because I was not patient, not with myself, not with delays, not with mistakes. Then came the introduction. Miles emailed his friend Jenna Walsh. She replied fast. She asked to see samples. I sent the guides. My hands shook a little. Jenna responded the next day. She said, these are clear. Who wrote them? Miles told her I did. She asked for a call. I had not done an interview in years. Not really. Miles prepped me. He said, don't pretend to be bigger than you are. Be precise. Tell the truth. Show how you think. The call happened on a Wednesday. Jenna's voice was bright. She asked about my current job. She asked about my process. She asked why I cared. And I said something honest. I said, I'm tired of people feeling stuck. I want the steps to feel like a handrail. When I said it, I surprised myself, because it sounded like a mission, not just a complaint. Jenna offered a small contract, 2 weeks, a few internal guides, paid, not huge, but real. I thanked her. I tried to sound calm. After the call I sat on my couch and stared at the wall. My apartment was quiet, and I realized I had been waiting for permission to start. And somehow, I had gotten it. That night I texted Miles. I wrote, "She said yes." Miles replied, "I knew you could do it." Then he added, "Now the real work begins." I asked, "What real work?" He said, "Protecting this new path, from old habits, from old fear, from people who will tell you it's not practical, from the part of you that will try to quit before you start." I did not like hearing that, because it felt true, but I also felt ready, in a way I had not felt in a long time. The next day at the office, tickets still came, Dana still sighed, the fluorescent lights still buzzed, but inside me, something had changed. There was a second story running under the first one, and for the first time, I could see where it might lead. Balancing the contract with my job was harder than I expected, not because the tasks were impossible, but because my energy had limits. I would work all day, then come home, then open my laptop again. The first few nights I felt strong, like adrenaline could do the work for me. Then the weekend arrived and I felt tired in my bones. I almost texted Miles to cancel our check-in, but then I heard his voice in my head. "Not perfect, next best move," so I showed up anyway. Miles looked at my face and knew. He said, "You're running on fumes." I shrugged. I tried to joke. He didn't laugh, not because he was mean, but because he was careful. He said, "You can't build a new life with the same schedule that drained the old one." I stared at him, because I wanted him to be wrong. Miles pulled out a notebook. He drew 2 columns. He wrote, "Energy in, energy out." He said, "We're going to design your week like it matters, because it does." He had me list what gave me energy: walks, good food, quiet time, talking to one friend. He had me list what drained me: doom scrolling, late nights, arguing with imaginary conversations. He circled the drains. He said, "These are leaks. We close leaks first, then we add fuel." It sounded simple, but it also sounded like respect, like he thought my time was valuable. I wasn't used to that. Then the office added pressure. Dana announced a new metric: faster response times, fewer notes, more volume. It felt like being asked to sprint while carrying a box. My contract deadlines didn't move, my bus schedule didn't care. My brain started to slip into old anger again. One morning I missed the bus a second time. I felt the familiar heat, the familiar mean thoughts, and I almost spiraled. But then I saw the cafe across the street, and I did the pivot. I walked in, I sat, I wrote down the next best move. I texted my manager early. I started my day from a calmer place. It did not solve everything, but it saved me from sinking. That week I delivered the first set of guides to Jenna. She replied with a short message: "Clean work, can you add a quick troubleshooting section?" I did it. She approved. She paid the first invoice. When the payment hit my account, I stared at it like it was unreal. It wasn't millions, it wasn't magic, but it was proof, and proof is powerful. I met Miles that evening. I showed him the payment. He smiled, then he said, "Celebrate in a healthy way. Not by buying something random." I laughed. He said, "Seriously, by yourself." Time. I asked what that meant. He said, "Take a day off next month, not for errands, not for chores, for thinking, for planning. You need space, not just hustle." I told him I couldn't. My job was strict. He looked at me and said, "Have you actually asked, or are you guessing?" I went quiet. Because I was guessing, I assumed my life was fixed, but maybe it wasn't. The next day I asked Dana for a personal day 2 weeks out. She frowned, then checked the calendar, then said, "Fine, put it in," and just like that, a locked door turned out to be unlocked. Later that day Miles texted me a simple line: "Don't live in assumptions." I saved it, because it felt like a rule I needed. Over the next few weeks I finished the contract. Jenna asked if I could stay on for more, a longer project, better pay. I said yes. I felt excited, then scared, then both at once. Because new doors can be loud when they open, and as the opportunities grew, so did my fear of messing it up. I started to realize Miles wasn't just teaching me guides, he was teaching me how to become someone who could handle change without breaking. The personal day arrived on a Thursday. I woke up and didn't rush. That alone felt strange, like I had stolen time from the world. I made breakfast. I opened my window, cold air came in, and I breathed like I had space in my chest again. Miles and I met at a quiet co-working spot he liked. It had plants, soft light, and tables that didn't wobble. He said, "Today we don't grind, today we map." He handed me a blank sheet. He said, "Write what you want your next year to look like, not what you think is realistic, just what you want. My pen hovered because wanting felt dangerous. I wrote anyway. I wrote, learn better skills, earn more, feel calmer, do work that matters, have time for friends, maybe travel, nothing dramatic, just a life with room. Miles nodded. He said, good, now we turn wishes into projects. He broke it down, skill, income, calm, meaning, relationships. He asked, what skill would change everything fastest? I said, I don't know. He said, you've been writing guides. What sits next to guides? I thought. I said, training, product education, user experience. Miles smiled. He said, yes, and also, process design. He pulled up a few online courses, but he didn't overwhelm me. He chose one path, one next best move. Then he asked about money. He said, what number would feel like breathing room? Not luxury, just room. I gave a number. He did not judge it. He asked, what projects get you there? He made it math, not fantasy. Then he asked about calm. He said, what are your top 3 triggers? I told him, lateness, feeling trapped, feeling judged. He nodded. He said, those are common, and they're workable. He taught me a small script from my own mind. He said, when you feel judged, ask, what evidence do I have, and what story am I inventing? It made me laugh, because I invented stories like a hobby. Then Miles suggested a weekend trip, not far, just out of the city, to attend a small workshop Jenna's company was hosting. He said it would be good networking, but also good practice. I almost said no, because I didn't see myself as a person who did workshops, but I heard myself say yes. We drove Saturday morning. Miles played quiet music, the highway stretched out, trees blurred. We talked about simple things, favorite movies, childhood hobbies, the kind of talk that reminds you you're human. At the workshop I met people who spoke in calm, clear language. They asked questions that were curious, not competitive. I felt like a beginner, but not like an outsider. Miles introduced me without hype. He said, Evan builds very clear internal guides, and he's learning fast. That sentence did something to me, because it was true, and it was kind. Later, Jenna pulled me aside. She said, I like how you explain things. Have you ever considered a training role? I felt my stomach flip again. I said I hadn't. Not seriously. Jenna said, consider it now. We'll have an opening in a few months, no promise, but I want you to apply. I nodded, trying to stay calm, but my hands were slightly shaky. On the drive back I told Miles. He didn't celebrate too big. He just said, good, now we prepare. And then he said something that stuck. Opportunities like prepared people, not perfect people. Prepared people. That night I lay in bed and realized how far I'd come from the bus stop anger, but also how much of my old self still tried to pull me back. I felt the edge of doubt. The familiar whisper, you'll mess it up, and for the first time, I had tools to answer back, not with bravado, but with a plan, the pivot, the map, the next best move, and the steady presence of a person I had met only because I had missed a bus. The next months became a quiet sprint, not frantic, but focused. I took the course Miles recommended. I practiced daily, short sessions, consistent. He said consistency beats intensity. I made small projects. I rewrote messy instructions into clean guides. I turned guides into short training slides. I recorded simple voice notes to test if my wording sounded natural. I asked Jenna for feedback. She gave it. Direct and useful. I kept my job for stability, but I treated my evenings like building hours, not escaping hours. I also worked on calm, because Miles insisted it mattered. He told me to build a morning buffer, to stop aiming for just in time. He said, just in time is a lie that stress tells you, so I started leaving 10 minutes earlier than 15. It felt weird, but then it felt powerful, because I stopped running, I started arriving, and arriving is different. In April Jenna messaged me. She said the training role was real now. Applications were open. My heart pounded. I read the job description. It was everything I had been practicing: clarity, onboarding, documentation, workshops, cross-team communication. It also had words that scared me: stakeholder management, program ownership. But Miles said those are just fancy labels for talking to people and keeping promises. We built my resume together. He made me quantify my work: guides delivered, time saved, tickets reduced. He made me tell the story of my shift, from support to training, without sounding like a fantasy. Then came the interview. First round with a recruiter, second with Jenna, third with a panel. I wore a simple shirt, I drank water. I did breathing like Miles taught me, I answered honestly. I told them why clarity mattered to me. I used the handrail line again, because it was true. The panel asked me what I would do if a training plan failed. I paused, then I said I would pivot, I would name what failed, gather feedback, choose the next best move, and improve fast. I saw one person smile, because they recognized the real process. After the final round I felt empty, like I had run a mental marathon. I met Miles at the cafe, the same one, like a circle closing. I told him how it went. He listened. He said, "No matter what they decide, you did something important. You showed up as the person you're becoming." That night I got an email. Subject line, "Update on your application." My hands shook. I opened it. I read it twice, then a third time, because my brain didn't believe it. They offered me the role, training specialist, start date in 6 weeks, higher pay, better hours, growth path. I sat on the floor, because my legs forgot how to work. I laughed, then I felt tears, not dramatic, just relief. I texted Miles one word, "Yes," he replied, "proud of you." Then he added, "Now keep going, because big changes come with new tests." He was right. Telling Dana I was leaving was awkward. She tried to act casual, but her eyes showed surprise. She said, "Good for you." I walked out of the office on my last day with a box of small things, a mug, a notebook, a cable. It felt like leaving a room I had lived in too long. The new job started, and it was exciting and intense. I had to run sessions, design onboarding, talk to teams, plan schedules. Sometimes I stumbled, sometimes I felt imposter feelings. But Miles kept me grounded. He reminded me, beginners are allowed to be beginners, and I realized the person who changed my life wasn't someone who gave me a magic shortcut. It was someone who taught me how to build stairs. With the new role came new pressure, good pressure, but pressure. People expected me to have answers, they expected me to be organized, they expected me to make training smooth, and most days I could. But some days the old anger tried to come back, not about buses now, but about meetings, about last-minute requests, about teams that wanted results without giving time. I had a day in my second month where everything piled up. A session started late because the room was double-booked. The projector didn't work. A manager walked in and frowned. Someone asked a question I couldn't answer. My face got hot. My mind started to spin. And in that moment I felt like the old Evan again, trapped and judged. I wanted to snap. But I remembered Miles's script. What evidence do I have? And what story am I inventing? The evidence was simple. Tech failed, timing failed, not me as a person, so I pivoted. I smiled. I said, "We'll do this without slides." I grabbed a marker. I used the whiteboard. I turned it into a conversation. People leaned in. It became better than the plan. Afterward, Jenna told me, "That was a strong recovery." I breathed out, because that was the test, and I passed it. Later that week, Miles and I walked by the river. The city lights reflected on the water. He asked me how I felt. I said, grateful, scared, and proud, all at once. He nodded. He said, "That mix is normal." Then he said something that surprised me. He said, "I might step back a little, not because I don't care, but because you're stable now. You don't need me in the same way." I stopped walking, because a sudden sadness hit me, not because he was leaving, but because I realized how much his presence had become part of my safety. Miles saw my face. He said, "Evan, this is the goal. Support is not a cage, it's a bridge." I swallowed. I nodded. He continued, "I'll still be here, just not as the training wheels you're riding now." That night I thought about that bus stop again, how random it felt, and how not random it felt anymore, because maybe random is just a word we use before we see the pattern. As autumn came, I took on a bigger project, a full onboarding redesign. It meant coordinating with 3 departments, scheduling sessions, updating documentation, building a feedback loop. It was a lot. I made mistakes. I missed one meeting. I forgot one email thread. I felt the old shame rise. But I didn't drown in it. I named it. I fixed it. I apologized. I moved on, stopped paying interest. I could almost hear Miles say it. The project launched. The first new hires went through it. Feedback came back, clearer, smoother, less confusion. One new hire said, "This was the first onboarding that didn't make me feel lost." I read that line twice, because it felt like my mission made real. I told Miles. He replied with a simple thumbs up. and for some reason that made me smile for a whole minute. Then in December, Jenna asked me to present at a company-wide meeting to explain the new training approach. I felt nervous, because big rooms still scared me, but I said yes. I prepared, I practiced, I did it, and afterward people came up to me with questions, with respect, with interest. I walked home that evening in cold air, and I realized my life had changed in a year, not because I got lucky once, but because I learned to pivot again and again. And because one stranger at a bus stop chose to speak to me when I looked like I didn't want to be spoken to. I started noticing how often other people were living in that old simmering frustration I knew so well, in the elevator, in the cafe line, at the bus stop, faces tight, shoulders raised, eyes fixed on screens, like the world was always late. I began doing small things, small kindness, small clarity, because it cost little and it mattered. At work I built a quick start page for every tool we used. I added plain language. I added friendly examples. I recorded short videos, nothing fancy, just human. We saw fewer support requests, and when requests came, they were calmer, because people felt guided. Jenna told me the metrics looked good. She said we should share the approach with other departments. I found myself in meetings with directors, people who used to feel like distant characters. Now they were just people, and I spoke with them like people. Miles's voice lived in my habits now, steady, curious, precise. One evening I got a message from an old coworker, Liam Brooks. He wrote, "I heard you moved to training. How did you do it? Can we talk?" I smiled, because the circle was continuing. I met Liam at the same cafe, because of course I did. He looked tired, he complained about tickets, he complained about feeling stuck, and I recognized my old self so clearly it almost hurt. I listened. I didn't lecture. I asked him what repeated issues he saw. I asked what he wished people understood. His eyes lit up a little as he answered, and I realized the questions were the gift, not the answers. I taught him the pivot. I watched him laugh at it, then quietly accept it. I gave him a simple plan, one guide, 1 week, one next best move. After he left I texted Miles. I wrote, "I think I'm turning into you." Miles replied, "Please don't, be a better version." I laughed out loud. The city around me felt less hostile, because my mind was less hostile. Later that winter I got invited to speak at a small local meetup, about building clear onboarding. I almost said no, because old fear still had a voice, but I said yes, because New Evan had a vote too. The day of the meetup I arrived early. I set up my laptop, I checked the microphone, I watched people enter. Some looked confident, some looked nervous. I started my talk with a story, not about my success, but about missing a bus, because it was honest. People laughed, they relaxed. Then I shared what I learned, pivoting, mapping, writing like a human. Clarity as kindness. After the talk a woman named Sophie Grant approached me. She said I needed to hear this. I'd been stuck in a loop. Can you recommend where to start? And I realized my life wasn't just changed, it was changing other lives in small ways too, and that thought was almost overwhelming, in a good way. On my way home I passed the bus stop where it happened, the same pole, the same sign, different day, different me. I stood there for a minute, people moved around me, buses came and went. And I felt gratitude that didn't need a big gesture. Just quiet recognition. I thought of Miles, of his calm eyes, his small smile, his simple card. I wondered how many times he had done that for others, and how many times someone had done it for him. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Miles. It said, "You free this weekend? I want to show you something." And I smiled, because even when mentors step back, they still open doors now and then. We met Saturday morning. Miles picked a place I had never been, a small community center with bright posters and folding chairs. Kids ran past laughing, adults carried boxes of supplies, the air smelled like paint and coffee. Miles greeted people like he belonged there. Because he did, he introduced me to a woman named Marissa Lane. She ran a program that helped people learn job skills, simple tech basics, resumes, interviews. Confidence, not flashy, just real. Miles said, "Evan builds clarity. And clarity changes outcomes." Marissa asked if I could volunteer once a month, maybe run a short session. I felt that old reflex. I'm too busy, I'm not qualified. But I caught it. I pivoted. The next best move was yes. With boundaries, I said I can do once a month, 2 hours. Marissa smiled like that was plenty. That day I watched a group of adults practicing email basics. Some were nervous, some were proud. One man laughed when he finally sent a message correctly. It was such a small thing. And it meant so much. I helped quietly, I answered questions, I showed steps, I saw shoulders relax when instructions were simple, and I felt something deeper than career growth. I felt useful in a way that was not about status. On the way out I asked Miles, "Is this why you were so calm at the bus stop? Because you had places like this in your life?" Miles looked at me, then nodded. He said, "Partly," he said, "when you see people rebuild. You stop treating small delays like disasters, because you learn what a real disaster looks like, and what a real recovery looks like." We walked outside, cold air again. But this time it felt clean. I told him I was grateful. He waved it off, but gently he said, "You did the work, Evan. You showed up, you stayed curious, you didn't let anger be your identity." I thought about that, anger as identity. It hit hard, because I had worn it like a jacket for years. I asked him, "What made you talk to me that first day?" Miles smiled. He said, "You look like someone who could be good, if someone interrupted the loop." And I said, "Why did you think that?" He said, "Because you were angry about being late, not angry about hurting anyone, you were angry because you cared, and caring can be shaped." We stood at the crosswalk, lights changed, people moved, the city hummed. I looked at the bus stop across the street. I could almost see my old self there, hand raised, jaw tight, thinking the world was against him, and I wanted to step back in time and tell him one thing, not a speech, just a sentence. I wanted to say, "This is not the end of your day, this is the start of your life." But time doesn't work like that, so instead I tell the story now. I tell it because someone listening might be at their own bus stop moment, staring at a thing that left without them, feeling that heat of frustration, and maybe they think it means they lost, but sometimes losing a bus is how you meet a person. And sometimes meeting a person is how you meet a new version of yourself. I still miss buses sometimes, I'm human. But when it happens, I pause, I name it, I pivot, and I remember a calm voice in cold air saying, "Rough morning, huh?" And I remember how a small choice, a small hello, can turn a bad morning into a new direction. And that is the true twist. Not that life becomes perfect, but that life becomes yours again, one next best move at a time.